Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Flexi webinar. My name is Bennett. I'll be the moderator for today. Our presenter is Jason Stone, one of our sales managers at SAi, and also one of our Flexi experts. Today, he'll be walking us through something kind of different, which is using Flexi for desktop UV printers. After the presentation, we'll be able to answer any questions you have, either about this topic or any other Flexi topics, so feel free to put those questions in the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can. We are recording the webinar as always, so if you want to review anything that Jason discusses or share it with someone else, we'll be sending you all the link to the recording this afternoon, so look out for that. And that's it for me, so I'll turn it over to Jason.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to jump in on this webinar. So this topic, printing on small UV format printers. Flexi has some tools in here that can make your life a little bit easier on here. So each printer is gonna print a little bit different. Printers have different ink sets in them, like white, varnish on there. So if you guys, each printer is a little bit different. So if you guys wanted to maybe just type in the type of printer that you have here, in the demos here, I've loaded a Roland small UV printer and a Muto small UV printer here. I can kind of go through and show you the differences on here. I've really got some pressure on me. We've got a gentleman from Muto who's joined in here, who used to work for Flexi, who probably knows a lot more about this subject than me. So welcome here, Derek. I'm just going to kind of go through a few things that I hope you find helpful for using Flexi and small UV printers here. The first thing I'm going to do is show you a feature within Flexi here, a design feature. A couple things here that within Flexi, we make it very simple to work with Braille and auto serialization and variable data here. So I know this is a very simple sign I've got up on my screen here, but one feature in Flexi that's very useful for these small UV desktop printers is Braille and our auto serialization feature in here. So the sign we have here is very simple. Maybe this is a room number sign going in a hotel or something, a hospital. So it's just a simple room number sign on here. You can see I've already got a number on here and Braille. So to create Braille in Flexi, it's actually very simple. So I'm going to delete my Braille I've already got in there. I've got my number in here. And if I were to just go here and go to my text and my Braille tool here, it's going to convert this text to Braille there. So we want to actually have the room number and Braille below it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to select the number, go to copy this. And then I'm just going to paste it back in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my text and convert this to Braille. So as I convert that converts it to Braille. I'm just going to put it underneath my lettering where I want it there. I'm going to go to arrange and align this. So now I've got my sign all set up on here. Now, if we needed to go through and produce multiple numbers on here, we don't have to create them all. We've got an auto serialization tool within Flexi. So if I select this and go to my arrange down here, I've got an auto serialization tool. And within this tool, I can tell it how many copies of these signs here. So I'm going to make 50 copies of these. We're going to do 5 columns on here. Your spacing on here, you can set this to whatever you want on there. I've got 1/4 inch spacing on here. And then this is important over here. We want to select the data that we're going to change on here. So this is representing both my text here and my Braille. So we want to make sure that we select both of these. Next, we're going to hit the next button. And then here's where I'm going to put in my data. I can manually go in here and type in the numbers that I want to put in here. That could take some time. Oops. So let me go back here. Select these, go to next. Instead of manually typing these in here, I'm going to select the auto serialize button here. So this makes it a lot simpler. We're going to set our starting point on here. We're going to go by the increments that we want to start on here. And when I hit OK, you can see it auto fills in here. You can see it didn't put it in here. So what we have to do is select this data here and do the same thing on here. It's important that if you're doing a sign like this, that you match your numbers here with your Braille, or else the Braille is going to be different than our text. And obviously we don't want that. From here, all we have to do is hit the finish button. And if I zoom out on here, you can see it creates all those different signs for me from here. So a very useful tool, makes it very easy to create signage like this with auto serialization on there. So this is a great tool that you can use for these small desktop UV printers and ADA signage. So the next thing we're going to get into here, I'm going to go ahead and close this. Or actually, before I close this, does anybody have any questions? It's a very simple tool on there. If you want to type in any questions you may have. If not, we'll kind of jump into the next topic here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions yet. You asked at the beginning for them to put in what printer they had, and Gary said he's working with an Aerosmart Dual XP600 DTF, and Jason's kind of become our knowledge base for DTF DTG printing, since Flexi 22 now has those capabilities. So Gary, I guess if you have any questions about how to do that, now's a good time to ask while we have Jason here. But yeah, for now, I'll let Jason continue with the presentation.
Yeah, so I saw that on there. So DTF is different than UV, these small UV printers here. This webinar is kind of based on creating like ADA signage and using those UV printers. I'm not familiar. We might have to ask you something there about that, because I wasn't familiar if DTF could be used with a UV printer on there. DTF is kind of something new that we've jumped into. We did a webinar a little while back that focused expressly on DTF and creating your white channel and stuff. This next demonstration that I'm going to get into kind of goes over some things that you could use for DTF and creating that white channel, but we're going to take it one step further and create a white channel, and then also a like a gloss or a clear channel on top of that as well. So I'll kind of break that up a little bit differently as we go through there. And then it looks like we've got another user on here who's got a latex printer, is looking into getting a small UV printer. And actually, we've got an expert on here who could tell you all about the Muto printers. Derek Moffat actually works for Muto, so maybe we could put you in touch with him after this here. Yeah, so another question in here, mainly I don't understand difference between Underbase, overprint, and varnish. And that is exactly what we're going to go over here in this next demonstration, which I think is very important in this market. So we're going to jump into Underbase and overprint and varnish and finisher within Flexi here. So there's a couple tools within Flexi to create all those different channels. And there's multiple ways to do this. I'm going to show you one way, but there's other ways that you can do this too. We're going to create these in Flexi, but you can kind of take these same elements and do your designs in Illustrator, CorelDRAW, or other programs. But Flexi Design makes it super easy to do some of these things. So I've got a graphic up on the screen here. And what I want to do with this graphic is I'm going to take the baseball and I want to create a white channel underneath the entire image here. Maybe we're printing on clear acrylic or something. So we're going to create that channel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the red in the seams here and we're going to apply a finisher on there. Maybe we're going to put a couple layers of varnish on there to give it a textured feel on there. So to create the white underbase here, there's a simple command in Flexi. If we select my graphic here, under effects, we have this awesome effect here called the underbase. There's a couple things you can do on here. I'm going to show you both these. You can create a solid underbase, which will create white underneath this image, or variable underbase, which is going to do exactly what it says. It's going to create different variations, different amounts of white underneath it. So let's start with the solid underbase. If I select my solid underbase, the brains of Flexi over here is Design Central. So anything we choose in Flexi is controlled by Design Central. So you can see it gives me my options for underbase. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky because each printer uses a different spot color for white, underbase, varnish, and all of those. And we can designate that in the RIP. So here, when I click that, it's going to create underbase. But if I open this up, you can see there's different spot colors created within Flexi that we could use for our underbase or our white on there. Some printers use underbase, some use white with a capital W. Roland uses like RDG_white. So I'll go over that a little bit here. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select underbase. And then I've got two options here. I can actually bleed this if I want, or I could choke it. So you can kind of see, I know it's probably small, but you see the little white under or the gray outline around here. You'll see if I change this, this is setting my bleed on here. So if I wanted 1/4 of an inch bleed around this, I could set that. Or if I select my choke on here, you can see it actually chokes it within the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put 1/8 of an inch and bleed it just so that you can see it here. And then one thing in Flexi that a lot of people kind of forget about sometimes is to click this green check mark here. So as soon as I apply that check mark here, it applies my underbase. Now, one thing that Flexi does kind of behind the scenes here is it puts the underbase under here, but all my graphic above this, it actually assigns an overprint to that. If you're designing in Illustrator or CorelDRAW, you can apply an overprint on there. So you can actually create your white channel. And one important step that a lot of people forget is overprint. I'm going to try and show you an example here of how this works. I'm going to open a new page and I'm going to create 2 boxes here. So I've got my 2 boxes here. I'm going to assign red to the top box here. And we're going to assume that this is my white channel here. If I were to send this over to print right now, the way it would print is if we wanted to print this white, the whole box underneath the red here as well. If we sent this to print right now, where the red box is here, where it's indenting in this gray square, it would actually knock that out and not print white underneath there. So it's very important if you go to effects and oops, maybe I'm in the wrong spot. It's under arrange, I'm sorry, and the overprint command here. So on my red, if I print overprint now when I send this to print, it's going to print this solid white box, and then it's going to print it's going to overprint the red over that white. So this is a very important step that sometimes people forget on there. So that's very important. The reason I went over this is when we do the underbase on here, it automatically applies overprint to the graphic that we did the underbase on. The next thing we're going to do is we want to put white under here, but then I want to take the red threads in the baseball here and apply a varnish to that so that we can give it kind of a texture on there. So if we select everything here, you see it selects everything on here. Or actually, you know what? I jumped ahead of myself here. I'm going to go back to the underbase and show you what the variable underbase does. So I'm going to hit the back button, undo the underbase we did on here. I'm going to go back to Effects Underbase and do a variable underbase on here. And I'm going to click Apply. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here and Effects, go to my Separate my variable underbase. And you can see the underbase that I did here is putting different amounts of white underneath it on here. So if you have a need for putting different variations under there in the DTF market, I know this is very important here. Sometimes you put more white under a lighter color or less light underneath different colors there. So that's the difference between the two options here. I will go ahead and do a solid underbase here and apply that. And then I'm going to go back here, Effects, I'll go to my underbase, and separate that just to kind of show you the difference here. So if I select my underbase now, you can see that it's doing solid white for that underbase there. So that's the difference between solid and variable underbase. So now if we want to put our varnish on the seams here, if I select this, everything's selected within the graphic. So we've got two selection tools up here. I can go up here and select it, and this is my Select Within tool. Or I can right click here and go to Select Within, and then I can just click on the red somewhere here. The tongue's the biggest. So we actually want to select all the seams. So if I go to Edit and Select, once I've got my red selected here, I can come down to Select Similar Color, and it selects all my red from here. So if I didn't want to select the eyes or the tongue, I'm holding down my Shift key, which you can't see, but I'm holding Shift. And if I select the tongue here, it deselects that tongue. We're not going to print the eyes on here, so we'll select those. Oops, I'm not sure it selected that one. So from here, we're going to, instead of doing an underbase, we're going to put a finisher on here. So finisher is putting something on. I like to think of it as finishing, putting it on top of something. And then underbase is putting it underneath. So from here, I can go to my effects, and instead of underbase, we've got finisher. So I could select a rectangular finisher, which would put something over the whole thing. Or if we go to shape finisher here, what it's going to do is it's going to select just the red that I had selected here. So again, you could come in here and select the spot color that you want on here. We're going to select finisher on here. And now I've got my graphic created with my underbase that's going to print white underneath it. And then my finisher is going to print a varnish or a clear gloss over the top of these seams here. From here, we're going to output it. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because the rest of the steps kind of vary on the actual printer that you have. So from here, if I come up to my print button on here, there's a couple important steps that we need to pay attention to here. So on here, we'll go through both the Mutoh printer and the Roland I have here to kind of show you some differences. On my Roland printer here, this first page is pretty self-explanatory. This shows the size of your bed. You can size your graphic to whatever you wanted to here. So if you wanted to make these 6 inches and put multiple copies filling up the bed here, you can do that. Here's your spacing on here. You can see if I put too much spacing, it bumps up my multiple copies up to the next page. I can put a 1/2 inch space on here. So like I said, this page is pretty self-explanatory. You're sizing it, telling it your copies and everything. We'll go back, make this full size on here. The thing we want to do is jump to the 3rd tab here. These are our advanced options, and there's a couple important steps that you really need to pay attention to here. You notice here on my color mode, I've only got CMYK. So if I tried to send this over, it's not going to recognize my white or my gloss channel on here. So you'll see as we open this up, we've got multiple different options on here that we can choose. We've got a CMYK with a white channel for printing white over your graphic. White CMYK is going to print the white underneath your graphic. We could print just in a white mode. And on this mode, we've got CMYK gloss, gloss, and white. So on this printer, it's probably got 2 print heads or 2 channels of gloss and then a white channel. This allows you to put multiple layers of gloss down to really build that up on there. And then I'm not real familiar with Roland, so raise and gloss white here. I'm really not familiar with those, but we're going to select the CMYK gloss with the white on here. So it's important that you pick your color mode to match your graphic and your printer. And then the next super important part is use printer spot colors here. So in the graphic that we created here by creating Underbase and Finisher on there, what that did is it created graphics and it applied a spot color to it. When you're working with a RIP like Flexi, what happens is when you get a spot color that comes into the RIP, it actually recognizes the name of the color, that spot color, and it knows that if you had Underbase or Finisher on there, it says, hey, I know that I'm supposed to do something special with this. And the way we designate that is we click the mapping button here. And you'll see all the different spot colors I had in this design. And we've got some designations over here. So you can see my Underbase here. With this printer, Roland has specific spot colors that will recognize white and gloss. I'll go back to the design and show you how to load those. But since we didn't use those, we have to designate them here. So Underbase, if I open this up, I can come in here and say for that Underbase I created, I want to print white. So these other colors on here are process colors within the design itself. So I'm just going to select these as process. Here my finisher shows up. This is where we want to print the gloss. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to come down to my gloss. And then these are process colors on here. So I'm going to designate those on there. And then I have everything set up on here. So now when I hit OK on here, from here, I can send that over to Production Manager. And then there's a couple ways we can get to Production Manager from here. Down here, I can select and open my Production Manager, or there's a little button up here that I can click that will open it up into my Production Manager. So from here, if I double click it on here, you can see, you can kind of see how it's kind of a little bit under gray on here. This kind of shows us that our Underbase is set up on there. And then from here, there's a couple things that we want to check on here to make sure that we're going to be able to print everything like we said on here. So this button is going to vary from printer to printer based on all the options available for that printer. You can see with this printer that we can actually vary the lamps on our UV printer, our position and our percentage and everything on there. So you can change those based on your manufacturer's recommendations on here. But the thing we want to pay attention to is these options right here. So my white and my gloss on here. We created our white and our gloss in the design here, but you could actually specify these within these options here. So in white coverage, when we say spot color, what we're telling the RIP is that we are looking for that spot color. And then we're going to print the white based on that spot color we created. The same with the gloss here. So we have these set to our spot color. You can see that there's some different options in here for generating our white. So if you didn't create the white in the design, you could actually come in here and say, I want to print white on my whole substrate. So if you do that, what it's going to do is it's going to print white on the artboard or substrate that you selected there. You could do it under CMYK. We wouldn't want to do this on this image here because it had white in there. So if we used under CMYK, it's only going to put white under CMYK color. It wouldn't have put a flood in there underneath the baseball. Then we've got some different options on here. We've got variable under, which is kind of like our variable underbase on there. Some different options. So the way we created this, we're going to select spot color. And from here, you would be good to send this over. When we created the underbase within Flexi, we did our choke and bleed within that. If you didn't do that, then you can actually, there's an option here, choke and bleed, where you can set your choke and bleed on here based on the, again, these are different options per printer here. So there's different layers within this printer and whatnot that you can set on there. So from here, we could send it over to print. I'm going to hit cancel on here. I'm going to go back here and delete this and show you the difference here. If we came here and selected our Muto printer on here, we do the same things on here. We got to come into our mapping on here and select these. So our underbase, we're going to select as, oops. See, I forgot here. We got to come up to the color mode here, and you've got different color modes on here. So you've got CMYK, white, varnish on here. You've got different options on here. It's almost too bad that I can't let Derek talk on here. I'd love to have him explain these more here. But what we're going to do is we're just going to select one with white, and varnish on there. So when I come down to my mapping here, I can select these. And on my underbase, we are going to print white on there. As my finisher, we're going to set that up as varnish. And then these other ones are already set as your process colors. So we're good there. From here, we're going to send the job over. I'm going to go to my production manager. And this time under the Muto, you can see it's got different options here based on the printer itself. So you can see within the Muto here, and I'm sure we could spend lots of time going off over all these different options on here. But I wanted to show you this to show the different options available on here. So again, your spot settings here, you could come in and set these, all those different ones we did on the roll-in. So this is really dependent as your printer drivers here. So you can see that you could set different whites, same as our first one here. So I just wanted to show you kind of the different options per printer based on this tool right here. So the next thing I wanted to get, are there any questions on here? I always have a tendency to talk too much and forget to ask questions.
But any questions? Yeah, it looks like you're doing a good job explaining.
Okay. So the next thing I wanted to jump in and show you within Flexi here is we have a great tool for setting up jigs for your printer here. For example, if you're going to print golf balls, iPhones, or different things, and you want to set those up on your UV printer, maybe you're going to print 6 at a time, or whatnot. So it does look like we have a question. So with DTF, because it's a transfer, the underbase of the finished image is printed on top of the transfer. Do I change the layer of underbase or do I use overprint? I'm actually gonna let me go through this next thing here, Gary, and then I will jump in and answer that question for you. There's actually a separate tool within Flexi for setting up DTF that is really cool. That's kind of different than this. So I'm going to jump back to your question here in a second, Gary. So the next thing we're going to jump into here is I'm going to go to my Roland printer here and go to default job properties. And I wanted to show you this feature down here. This is a jig template tool that we set up for Flexi in Flexi 21. That is a really cool tool that's going to save you a lot of time. So what you do is you want to define your jig layout. So if I click the button here, there's all sorts of options that I've got on here. So the first thing that we can do is set up our media size here. So I'm going to set up a 12-inch by 12-inch. Actually, we're gonna go. Yeah, well, let's do this. We're gonna set up like an 18 by 12-inch jig here. We can set margins on here for your artwork if you want to. I'm going to leave these at 0. And then the jig size here, this is designating each square on here. So we're going to set up some golf balls. Golf balls are just under 2 inches, and I know they're round, and we've only got squares on here. I'm really hoping in future releases of Flexi that you're going to have the ability to import a shape and use those in your jig template here rather than just squares. So we're just going to go with squares for right now. You've got some different options here as far as margins as well. Fit jobs to jigs, we're going to click that and then fit proportionately on here. If you click this button, if you bring in something that's larger than 2 inches by 2 inches, it's going to proportionally fit it into our jig here. Our spacing on here is the spacing in between each of these. We're going to set this at 1/4 of an inch just to change it up here a little bit. Oops, I'm having trouble typing. We're going to put the spacing on here, and you're going to see that based on all my parameters here, it's allowing us to fit 40 golf balls on this 12 by 18 inch here. And then there's a couple options as well on here. We can actually print this jig layout. You could do this on the bed of your printer itself. So maybe you could put transfer tape down on the bed of the printer, print your jig layout on there, and then just lay your objects on there. Obviously, that might not work very well with golf balls. They're probably going to roll all around there. But if you were doing iPhones or something flat, you could print that on there. Just put all your iPhone covers on there and then put your graphics in there and hit print. So a new feature that we added into Flexi here is we can export this jig template as an EPS. So if you wanted to, you could export this as an EPS, bring it into Illustrator or CorelDRAW, take all your graphics and then put those within that jig. Or if you wanted to send, maybe you've got a CNC guy or a 3D printer, you could send them that EPS file and they could actually build a jig for you out of expanded foam, Sintra, or something that you could put on your printer there. So those two options are there. Once we create a jig layout, from here, you could come up here and actually save this if you wanted. So I've already got a template here for golf balls. I'm going to save this as golf balls. And then we're going to do 12 by 18 for the size of my bed here. I hit OK. And then you can see my jig layout presets here. So I've already got one with golf balls that has, I just did a 10 by 10 bed, or else I've got my 12 by 18 here. So we're going to cancel out of this. We're going to cancel out of this. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to open up some jobs. So I'm going to go in here to add job. And I'm going to add these different logos in here. These are logos from different resellers that sell Flexi or printers or sign and graphic supplies out there. So now that I've got some files in here, what we're going to do is we're going to nest all these together. So you can't see me on my keyboard, but I'm holding the shift key down. I'm selecting all these, and then I'm going to hit the nest button. One feature that I wanted to show you real quick that's new in Flexi 22 here is I'm going to leave this fourth one out. I'm going to create a nest with just these three here. And if I open this up, you can see it nests these jobs here. I'm going to come back to this. But the reason I didn't do the fourth job here is because we can actually take this now with Flexi 22. And if I wanted to add this job into this nest, we can do that by dragging and dropping. So if I click it, drag and drop up here, it says, do you want to add this job into the nest? I'm going to click yes here, and it adds it into my nest. So this is a cool feature within Flexi. It nests jobs here. You can do this with any type of printing, which is a really cool feature. But what we want to do is we want to apply our jig layout here. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply jig layout. And then you can select your jig layout on here. So then it's got my golf ball jigs on here. You can see that it placed each one of my logos on here. And we can actually come in here now and select how many we wanted to print of each of these. So if we needed to print 4 of this logo, we can put 4 in here. If I needed to print just 2 of these, I can select that. Maybe we need to print 6 of this logo. And on this one, we're going to put 12 on here. So you can see that I put more logos on here than I have spaces for on my jig. So what it did is it placed the rest on a second jig up here, actually a third one. So we've got 3 on here. If you do that, what you want to do is click this pause between pages. So what that's going to do is it's going to print this first page, and then it's going to pause. It's going to allow you to take those printed golf balls off of there, load up fresh golf balls in there, and then send your second page over. So this jig template is really cool on here. Derek from Muto, who's on the line here, I'm sure he could tell you cases of people who are using this jig template that are saving tons of time than how they used to do things on there. So this is a really, really cool, great feature that we've added into Flexi. So I'm going to pause again for any questions. I know that's kind of self-explanatory on the jig template there. Are there any questions on that? Yeah, Derek, he put on there, jig templates save an enormous amount of time. So yeah, if you have one of these printers, I'd love to hear you using this jig template. It's going to save you a lot of times and a really useful feature on there. Okay, so we're gonna jump away from UV printers here and jump into Gary's question on DTF, which actually applies to UV printers as well, because it has to do with creating white channels and gloss on here. So what I'm gonna do here, Gary, is I'm gonna delete this out. And I'm going to open a different file into here. I'm going to go in and add a new job. Give me a second here to pull this up. I'm going to go into some of my sample files. And I'm going to open up 2 different samples here for you. It's the exact same file. One is a job that's created here, and this has no white designation in it whatsoever. The other job that I've opened up in here is a PNG file that we've created a transparent background on. We'll get into it here and show you why I selected the two files here. But I'm going to open up this file, and we've added a new tab in Production Manager for Flexi 22. That's really, we made it for DTF, but it has its place in large format printing with printers that have white, or these UV printers that have white and gloss on it. So we're going to go to this tab. And this file, we didn't generate any white in the design, so we're going to use this tab to do that. So this is our new transparency tab, and this is pretty cool. So this graphic has no white in it, and we want to put a white flood behind this whole image here. So what we're going to do is we're going to click Create Transparent Background, and I'm basically going to knock out areas where I don't want white to print. So I'm holding down my Shift key, and I select one corner, I select here, I select this corner, and I select this corner. There is another tool on here if we wanted to create this and wanted to select similar areas. If I select this button here, it knocks out all my white. I want white in here. So that's where I use my Shift key to knock out just the areas I want to. You can also use this to knock out other colors beside white. So it's not just white on there. So I'm going to go back here and knock out these four corners. And then we want to generate white underneath here. So what we do, oops, I don't have, we got to come back here to my color mode. I didn't have a color mode with white in it here, so we're going to come here to CMYK white. We're going to come back here, and now it gives me my white channel on here. If I open this up, it's just white. If I come back here and change this to something that has gloss in it as well, you can see that it gives me white and gloss here. So we're going to leave it on this just to show you so it's relevant to UV printing here as well. But what we're going to do is my white channel, if I open this up, I want to create my white based on the transparent mask that I created here. We can come in here and we can do the same for our gloss if we wanted to, set that to use transparent. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back here, and this button right here is going to give me a preview and output channel. So I can actually come in here and preview my white channel. You can see that this black represents where it's going to print white, and my gloss channel here. So if we come back here, and if we change this, you can also, you don't have to do a transparent mask. Again, here we kind of went over this in driver options earlier. If we wanted to set this as solid under for my white, you can see the difference here when I come to my white. It's just putting white under solid colors on there. So you can see it's not putting white under where we wanted white here. That's why I created my transparent mask on here. So that's one way to set white if you don't have it within your design itself. So that is that's another way to create white and gloss on there. So this is very useful in DTF printing, and a lot of DTF printers, it's going to set up that white. It prints over the top of it. So based on your driver options there, it's going to print the white. It's going to print color first and then white over the top of it. So hopefully that answers your question there, Gary. That's a super easy way to do it. Most people who are doing DTF printing, they're creating their files in Illustrator, CorelDRAW, Flexi for that matter. They're saving it as a PNG file that's already got a transparent background. So this file is a transparent PNG. And if I bring that into here, all I have to do is I got to set my color mode here. So if I have my CMYK white mode on here, if I come back here, all I have to do is I don't have to create a transparent background. All I have to do is set my white channel to use transparency mask, which is already created in the file. And if I go to my white here, it should show it on there. I wonder if it has something to do with the printer I've got set up on here. Let's see here. Okay. White. Let's see if that works here. Yeah, so see, it sets up the white on there. And then Gary, depending on your printer, you can see the white mode here, and every printer is a little bit different. This printer has a CMYK white mode. So that's going to print cyan, magenta, yellow, black, and then white over the top. Whereas if you selected white, CMYK, it's going to put down the white first and then the color over the top of it. So that's useful in UV printers. If you're printing on clear acrylic, you could, and you wanted to see it through the acrylic, you could print your CMYK down first and then white over the top of it. For DTF printing, you'd use the same thing there.
And Gary, like Jason mentioned earlier, we did do a DTF DTG specific webinar a couple weeks ago. So that'll be on our YouTube channel if you ever want to go back and watch that. And if you don't know where our YouTube channel is, you'll get an email with the recording of this webinar later today, and you can follow that to our YouTube channel. We had a question from Eric, who's new to Flexi. He's asking if this is Flexi Print RS. Jason is using, I'm assuming, Flexi 22, which is the latest version of Flexi. He'd be using basically what you'd be using if you were on a subscription. Flexi Print RS is a slightly different version of Flexi. It has many of the same capabilities, but that's a little bit more affordable option of Flexi, so it has slightly less features. Jason, am I speaking correctly here?
Yeah, so we could get really in the weeds deep with this. The great thing about Flexi is we have multiple ways to purchase it. You can purchase a subscription-based version of Flexi where you pay monthly or yearly for it. And there are several different options there. You've got full Flexi, which has the design side of it, the rip built into it. And you can purchase it that way. We also have a subscription for just the design side of Flexi that doesn't have the rip or production manager, which you see here, where you just design. You've got Underbase, you've got Braille, you've got all that good stuff in there. A great example of this is Muto. I know somebody on here said they were looking into UV printers. If you buy a Muto UV desktop printer, they have their own rip, but then it comes with Flexi, just the design side of Flexi. So you do your designing, your Braille, your variable, your auto serialization, everything there. And then you send it over to the Muto rip to output from there. Or if you have Flexi sign and print, you can have multiple design stations. I'm actually not familiar with Flexi Print RS, but the Flexi Print designation designates just the rip. So it would be production manager, where you would be designing in Illustrator, CorelDRAW, and then opening files into here. And then just to hit on it for Gary with DTF, we do have a subscription-based, just a DTF product, which doesn't have cutting capabilities. So our Flexi sign and print, if you have a Muto cutter, a GraphTech cutter, a Suma cutter, it gives you those capabilities. DTF is usually just printing. So we took cutting capabilities out there, and you can print, you can do a subscription to Flexi DTF. You can go to our website, thinksai.com, and look at all the different products there. The other cool thing is that we don't sell just subscriptions. So if you don't want to pay monthly and just want to buy Flexi outright, we've got those options as well. You can buy Flexi sign and print, Flexi Designer or Flexi DTF version. You buy it, and then you're on that version. So if then the nice thing about the subscription is if we come out with a new version, you don't pay any upgrade fees if you buy Flexi outright. If we come out with a new version, there's usually a cost associated to upgrade. So again, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes I like to talk a lot. So hopefully I didn't confuse everybody there, but there are lots of different ways to buy Flexi. Flexi comes bundled with a lot of printers, HP printers, Mutoh printers, and whatnot. So hopefully this was some good information. Do we have any more questions before we end our webinar here?
Nothing right now. Just give it another minute to make sure no one else has anything else to bring up while we're here live.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so jumping back to Flexi, there's all sorts of different tools here that you can do. Under text, we have our Braille. We also have barcoding. So all sorts of ways to work with text and graphics. So if we type in the Flexi website here, you can come in here instead of text and converting it to Braille. We can come in here and we can create a barcode here. We've got different barcode options. We've got QR codes. So we could create a barcode. Within that, the design side of Flexi is awesome. Illustrator and CorelDRAW are great programs, do a lot of advanced features. Flexi just makes it super easy to do all this stuff, creating Braille, QR codes, text, graphics, everything out there.
All right, I see someone's typing, so we'll go ahead and wait for that. But if there are no other questions, that we might go ahead and close it out after that one.
All right.
And again, I'll just say, if you don't come up with a question now and you happen to be watching the recording of this webinar later and come up with a question, you can always put that question in the comments of the videos and we'll answer it there or refer you to a place where you can get the answer for it. Okay, Ray asks, what about perspective text?
Perspective text. So that can be, yeah, I kind of think I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of different options in here. Most of them are under the effects menu here. We've got a distort option on here, which is going to distort your text. We've got all sorts of distort options that you can select. And then you grab different points on here. You can do different things. So this one kind of gives it a little bit of a perspective there. You can also come in here and go to effects and shadow. This tool has got some different perspective things on here too. There's different ways to create a drop shadow here. If we do transparent, it gives it kind of more of a realistic type shadow on here. But what I think maybe you're asking about is if we go to effects and shadow on here, instead of transparent, we've got some, where are they here? Right here, different options. So this is just a drop shadow. We've got perspective on here, which I think you might be asking about. So let's maybe do this. I'm going to undo this. And we're going to go to effects, shadow, and we'll go to perspective there. So you could, oops, sorry about that. Shadow, perspective. You've got different options here where you can move that perspective point on there, move it up or down. So a lot of things within Flexi, you just got to kind of get in here and play around with these. And then this button decides how it actually does the perspective. Like here, like this first button is just going to be, it's not going to have anything underneath the text. This is going to put things under the text. So if you're like cutting out vinyl, you can break those apart. but all sorts of different options there. So we'll put gray, hit OK on there, and it kind of does that. Hopefully that answers your question there, Ray.
Yeah, and then a question from Eric. I'm not quite sure, maybe he can clarify. He says, on the printer, color mode customer, can I do any color change on this button? Jason, maybe you know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I think so. So if we go in here to default job properties, and then we come to the color mode here, these are set up by, these are usually set up by the manufacturer. They're kind of settings that they've set up that, that they recommend for the printer. There is an option right here, this custom button, where you can come in and you can kind of create your own color mode here. So you can see CMYK here. If I select this, depending on how many channels are within your printer, you can actually come in here and then set these as process, or light would be like light cyan, light magenta, spot color, or none on there. So I'm kind of jumping back to our DTF guy on here. I helped a customer the other day. They had a printer that had 8 channels, and we actually came into the custom color mode here. We set it to CMYK, and they put fluorescent colors in their printer on the 4th, 5th, or the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th channel on there. And what we did with those channels is we set them to spot color here. So the way that works then, CMYK, if we set those to process, they're obviously going to use process color to create color. And then on this one, for example, here, this 5th and 6th channel, if we set those to spot, and then I call this fluorescent pink, and then we can set this is just a representation here. But the way I set this up here then is if I create a design with a spot color called exactly capital FLUO capital P, whenever it sees that spot color called that, it's going to print just that channel of your printer, that fluorescent pink color. And then real quick, to create spot colors in Flexi, it's super simple. You come in here. If I create something here, I'm just going to give it a color, but I go up to my color specs tab here. And then what I can do is I can come in here and change this to spot color. And I can call this, I should have picked a pink, but I could call this that fluorescent pink that I did. We come in here, select a pink color, hit OK, and then hit OK. And then down here, oops, I did something wrong. I didn't select spot. So if I select spot, I didn't change the color. I'm getting kind of tongue-tied here. But you can see down in my color palette, it created a color, and anything that has a spot in it's a spot color. So now if I sent this over to the RIP, it reads that name, and it's going to print just that channel. So kind of long-winded, but hopefully that answered your question there.
Yeah, lots of options in Flexi here. Looks like that's the last question we have, so we'll go ahead and close it out for today. Thanks, Jason, for walking us through this and for answering those questions. Thank you all for joining us for the webinar. Our next Flexi webinar will be about color management, which will have some great tips for you. That'll be on November 8th, and we hope to see you there. We'll have the link to sign up for that in the webinar follow-up email that you'll receive later today. Make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter so you won't miss out on any webinars or other announcements, and you can sign up for that on our website. Thank you again for attending. We hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time.